Thousands of black-clad protesters visited the memorial site of a fellow protester who fell to his death on Saturday while standing on a scaffolding in front of Hong Kong's Pacific Place shopping mall. 35-year-old man died on June 15 while unfurling a banner against the controversial extradition bill. Tens of thousands thronged the streets of Hong Kong despite the country's chief executive, Carrie Lam's announcement to suspend the legislation. Protesters formed a sea of black along roads, walkways and train stations across Hong Kong's financial centre to vent their frustration and anger at Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam. The US president is also used to having his name adorn the property that he owns, but a decision by the Israeli Prime Minister has put the Trump surname brand on an entirely different sort of real estate. A new settlement in northern Golan Heights has been named after the American president. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself unveiled the new Trump Heights town, an honor bestowed on the US president out of gratitude for the White House's recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the territory. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's wife Sarah appeared on court on Sunday to admit criminal wrongdoings over the misuse of state funds to order catered meals in a plea bargain carrying no jail time. Under the agreement, a fraud charge was reduced to a lesser offence and she will pay the state a reimbursement and fine money. According to the original indictment, Sarah Netanyahu, along with a government employee, fraudulently has they obtained from a state more than $100,000 for hundreds of meals supplied by restaurants, bypassing in fact regulations that prohibit the practice if a cook is employed at home. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is stressing on diplomacy in responding to suspected attacks on oil tankers near a Middle East shipping route. Speaking to an American news channel, Pompeo said that American officials are reaching out to their foreign counterparts and that intelligence officials have lots of data and lots of evidence tying Iran to alleged attacks on two oil tankers traveling near the Strait of Hormuz. Pompeo added that the U.S. will use quote-unquote diplomatic and otherwise, in fact, to guarantee unhindered shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. A migrant crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border is set to intensify as Mexico plans to deploy 6,000 National Guard troops to its southern border with Guatemala to slow the arrival of migrants passing through, in fact, towards the way to U.S. Footage showed Mexican soldiers with black National Guard armbands stationed near the country's border with the neighboring Guatemala. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has said that Saturday that his country must help Central Americans fleeing poverty and violence. However, increased security and revisions to deter migrants have followed in response to pressure from the U.S. Outrage amounts in the U.S. after an African-American man was shot dead by the police in Memphis City in Tennessee. 20-year-old Brandon Weber was shot and killed by U.S. Marshals on Wednesday night in Memphis Fraser community. According to the U.S. Marshal Service, their officers were attempting to serve an arrest warrant for multiple felonies on Weber when they saw him getting into a car outside a home. The shooting prompted protest in Fraser with dozens of angry residents throwing stones and tree limbs until police broke up the angry crowd with tear gas. Switzerland and its biggest trading partner, the European Union, are yet to sign a framework deal over their future relations. This as the deadline ends on Tuesday. The two sides had come up with the draft deal almost 4 years ago to decide the Eurozone's ties with Switzerland, which is a non-EU member. Switzerland fears that EU workers who come at a cheaper rate may take the job of domestic workers. But the Eurozone wants the deal to be finalized as soon as possible. The failure to reach a deal has been further complicated by the coming Swiss parliamentary polls that will take place on October 21st. Conservative Party leadership candidates arrived at the London television studio on Sunday to take part in a debate. They hope to impress party members to vote for a new leader and British Prime Minister. Several vying to replace British Prime Minister Theresa May turned their fire on Boris Johnson on Sunday, questioning his pledge to leave the European Union by the end of October. Several hundred protesters gathered in Moscow in a small government-authorized rally supporting investigative journalist Ivan Golunov. Protesters decried abuse of power over his 5-day arrest this month on drug charges. A rally was called by the Russian Union of Journalists and named justice and fairness to everyone, who drew a significant number of protesters in support of Golunov. 36-year-old reporter is known for exposing corruption among Moscow officials and was freed following an outcry by supporters who said that he was framed by corrupt police. Guatemalans headed to the polls on Sunday to cast their vote for the next president. The voters followed an electoral process that generated widespread disillusion and distrust, just as tens of thousands were fleeing poverty and gang violence in the country to seek a new life in the U.S. Voters are choosing among 19 candidates for a 4-year presidential term that begins in January 2020. A massive power outage gripped large parts of Argentina and Uruguay. Authorities say that massive blackout had been prompted by a failure in the country's coastal grid, which started a chain of events that left tens of millions of South Americans without power on Sunday. Power has now been restored to more than 50% of Argentina and Uruguay. Both countries share a common power grid centered on Salto Grande Dam. Days after bloodshed and unabated violence of human rights, efforts are being made to pull Sudan out of a political turmoil. The head of the Arab League held talks with the head of the ruling military council in the Sudanese capital of Khartoum. Ahmed Abol Ghiet said that his meeting with General Abdel Fattah Burhan was positive as they discussed possible solutions to the political crisis. Remember, Sudan recently faced a violent military crackdown in which more than 100 civilians were killed. It was after a day of civil disobedience that both sides found a middle ground and agreed to negotiate. Meanwhile, Sudan's ex-president Omar al-Bashir was charged with corruption-related offences on Sunday as he appeared in public for the first time since he was overthrown in April. Wearing traditional white robes and turban, he was also driven to the prosecutor's office in Khartoum. His prosecutors said that the president was facing charges of possessing foreign currency, corruption and receiving gifts illegally. Bashir was given a chance to respond to the charges. A Japanese police officer was stabbed several times in the chest with a kitchen knife and his loaded handgun stolen while on patrol on Sunday morning in the western city of Suita near Osaka, Japan. The attack, which police believe may have been premeditated, sparked a manhunt with police using loudspeakers at a railway station to warn people to be on alert. The stabbing comes 2 weeks before Japan hosts a leaders' summit of the group of 20 major economies in the neighboring city of Osaka. Heavy floods continue to batter southern China. Rescuers, in fact, evacuated dozens of people from a flooded village in Qinzhou city after rainstorms hit the village and resulted in rising water levels of a water channel. Surging floodwaters poured into the village and inundated many houses. The water depth in some areas reached more than 2 meters. Some villagers, including babies, children and elders, were trapped by the flood. France has decided to declare a state of natural disaster after heavy rain and flash hailstorms ravaged crops in southeastern France. A German tourist was killed by a falling tree while camping, and 10 others were slightly injured in the Drôme and in the departments. Now, the video recorded and uploaded on social media showed the moment a vehicle was caught in a hailstorm, with occupants in the car shocked as a giant hailstone smashed the windshield. Pope Francis donned a white firefighter safety helmet and entered a damaged cathedral during a visit to central Italy, where he encouraged people still struggling to come back to normalcy 3 years after a devastating earthquake. Before he entered the cathedral, a firefighter safety helmet was placed over Francis's skull cap. Inside the cathedral, he was surrounded by firefighters and clergymen also wearing helmets. In fact, Camerino was shaken so badly that people are still not allowed into the town centre as work continues to stabilize structures. Residents of a small town in eastern UK county of Lincolnshire are bracing for more rain after severe flooding forced the evacuation of around 600 households. More than 2 months' worth of rain fell into 2 days of the town of WION All Saints earlier this week, causing the river steeping to burst its banks. A town first got flooded on Wednesday. The floodwaters have now mostly cleared, but more heavy rain is expected. The remains of 3 Bolivian miners who were trapped in a mine in Chile were pulled out on Sunday. Only one miner was rescued alive. 2 of the deceased, Salomon and Lenin, were father and son. San Jose mine collapsed late Thursday, trapping the men at a depth of nearly 330 feet. The accident brought to mind another landslide that trapped 33 miners 9 years ago, who were rescued alive after 69 days. Scientists in Burkina Faso are conducting an experiment to test whether a fungus genetically engineered to produce a toxin found in spider venom can provide a breakthrough in the worldwide fight against malaria. Now, in fact, the scientists at the University of Maryland engineered the DNA of a particular fungus to deliver a toxin produced by Australian Blue Mountains funnel web spiders. Toxins, in fact, kills the malaria-carrying mosquito when the fungus comes in contact with insect blood. A breakthrough could help the Western African country that deals with millions of cases of malaria each year. It is day 1 of the first session of the Lok Sabha, of the 17 Lok Sabha of this year. The 543 freshly elected members will take their seats in the Indian Parliament this morning. The first 2 days of the session will be used for administering the oath of office to the members of Parliament. The oath will be administered by Pro Tem Speaker Virendra Kumar. The Indian Medical Association has called for a strike today, withdrawing all non-essential health services across the country. Scores of doctors from both private and government hospitals across the nation have decided to boycott their work for 24 hours. The strike will be held in solidarity with a recent outbreak of doctors' protest in Bengal following attacks on 2 junior doctors at NRS Medical College. The emergency and casualty services will be in operation during the strikes. The death toll in the encephalitis cases in the 2 hospitals in eastern Bihar has risen to 93 at a government-run medical college and hospital in Muzaffarpur. 76 children have died, while 17 other children have lost their lives at another maternity hospital in the area. Indian Health Minister Harsh Vardhan visited the medical college to take stock of the situation. In the wake of the deaths, Bihar's Chief Minister Nitish Kumar had in fact announced an ex gratia of 4 lakh rupees to each of the mourning families. The Embassy of Nepal in India, in fact, the Embassy of India in Nepal has celebrated its 5th International Yoga Day on Sunday. The embassy organized this event in the base camp of the Mount Everest for the very first time. The ambassador of India to Nepal, Shri Manjeev Singh Puri, was also present along with other embassy officers. Foreign tourists, mountaineers and researchers also joined the Yoga Day celebrations. The main objective of the program was to, in fact, highlight the importance of yoga in daily life and to bring peace and harmony across the continents, nations and people. An Italian who allegedly posed as Hollywood actor George Clooney to sell clothes online has been arrested with his wife in Thailand after years on the run. 58-year-old Francesco Galdini and his wife were arrested at a house on the outskirts of Pattaya after an operation by Thai and Italian authorities. The couple is also wanted in Italy for multiple scams, including selling fake Rolex watches online. Their crimes led them to be dubbed the Italian Bonnie and Clyde, after the notorious American bank robbers of the Great Depression.